At 6:17 in the morning on January 2nd, my mobile phone vibrated violently off my nightstand. 17 missed calls flooded the screen. 9 came from Derek Thornton, Chief Operating Officer at Vanguard Retail Technologies. 4 came from Human Resources. The rest belonged to managers who had spent the preceding week convincing themselves that my departure was a routine transition. Derek's latest voicemail contained none of his usual executive restraint. "Calvin, we have $28.4 million in enterprise retailer orders frozen inside the primary processing queues," he demanded. "Clear your calendar, log into production immediately, and call my direct line." I sat on the edge of my bed, opened my personal laptop, and checked an off-boarding security verification receipt issued at midnight on January 1st. The receipt confirmed that my administrative identity, security tokens, and infrastructure privileges had been completely revoked across all cloud environments. 8 days earlier, on December 24th at 4:12 in the afternoon, Vanguard had unilaterally canceled the $65,000 retention bonus I had earned through 9 months of rigorous engineering work. 4 written technical warnings regarding the planned New Year's system consolidation were sitting inside corporate archives. And before handing over my company laptop on New Year's Eve, I had personally ensured that my production access was revoked under corporate compliance guidelines. Those 3 facts were directly connected, though not in the way Derek intended to portray to the board. My name is Calvin Vance. I am 49 years old, and until midnight on New Year's Eve, I was Director of Platform Reliability at Vanguard Retail Technologies. For 9 years, I had built, monitored, and defended the infrastructure network now failing across every executive telemetry dashboard. My phone rang again. I answered on the 5th ring. Incident management had taught me that panic consumes mental bandwidth needed for analytical clarity. The reality facing Vanguard was simple. Derek wanted the technical judgment he had stopped paying for, delivered through server access I no longer possessed under federal security regulations. "Calvin," Derek began, "we need you on the incident bridge right now. Use your administrative token to unblock the reconciliation queue." My tokens were decommissioned at 12:01 yesterday morning, I replied. "Then tell Enterprise Security to reactivate them immediately," Derek snapped. "We have retail partners threatening default penalties." "I no longer work for Vanguard Retail Technologies," I said. "Security cannot legally provision administrative access to a former employee simply because an executive voicemail sounds urgent." Derek exhaled sharply into the microphone. "This is not the morning for a legal policy lecture. It is precisely the morning for one," I replied. I was not taking pleasure in the gridlock. 61 enterprise retail corporations relied on Vanguard's system. Their operations represented consumer purchases, regional warehouse schedules, and freight logistics. But accessing Vanguard's production environment without an active contract, written legal authorization, and audited credentials would violate Computer Fraud and Abuse Act regulations under 18 U.S.C. Section 1030 and SOC 2 compliance controls. Furthermore, I had not locked anyone out. Vanguard owned every cloud server, automated repository, encryption key, emergency service account, and architectural document. Before leaving, I had compiled 28 pages of operational runbooks and a complete dependency map. Their internal cloud team could see the alarms. What they lacked was the operational experience required to determine which frozen processing queue had to be released first, without generating duplicate transactions across client databases. The platform had not crashed. It had paused itself to protect system integrity. That distinction was costing Vanguard thousands of dollars every minute. "Are you refusing to assist us during a critical failure?" Derek asked. "I am refusing to access a corporate environment unlawfully," I answered. "Submit a formal request through external legal counsel." Before Derek could reply, another executive voice interrupted his line, reporting that the backlog had just surpassed $30 million. I heard Derek cover his receiver as he demanded why Nolan Drake could not execute the emergency recovery document. That was the core question. Vanguard possessed the documentation. It had simply chosen not to fund the human experience required to execute those recovery sequences under pressure. I ended the call and opened an archived email folder my attorney had instructed me to preserve. The top message was timestamped December 24th, 4:12 in the afternoon. Subject: Retention Award Notice. 9 years of loyalty had been reduced to 4 corporate paragraphs delivered right before Christmas dinner. To understand why I refused to rescue Vanguard for free on January 2nd, it is necessary to examine how corporate leadership convinced itself that technical expertise was an optional overhead expense. Vanguard Retail Technologies operated as a $48 million annual recurring revenue enterprise software vendor. Its platform processed $4.2 billion in retail transactions annually across 61 corporate accounts. When our infrastructure functioned correctly, an e-commerce order moved seamlessly from store websites to inventory databases and fulfillment centers without human intervention. When I joined 9 years earlier, that pipeline was a fragile collection of unscripted workarounds and emergency patches remembered only by whichever engineer happened to be awake at 3 in the morning. I rebuilt the architecture, recruited methodical engineers, and transformed operational panics into written procedural runbooks. We constructed a resilient multi-region infrastructure, automated routine recovery, and established clear incident command roles. The financial results were verifiable. I reduced annual cloud computing expenses by $1.8 million through automated resource scheduling. My team maintained 99.98% platform uptime across 3 consecutive holiday seasons. On November 21st, we completed a multi-region database migration 9 days ahead of schedule. The subsequent SOC 2 Type 2 compliance audit yielded 0 critical security findings. Above my workstation, I maintained a framed red card bearing a single sentence: "No production change without a designated rollback owner." Junior managers occasionally smiled at the sign, but they stopped smiling whenever a software release encountered latency and my team executed a clean, predetermined rollback without losing a single order. In April of that year, Vanguard's board presented me with a signed $65,000 retention agreement. The contract outlined 4 specific conditions: complete the migration by November 30th, achieve 0 critical audit findings, maintain at least 99.95% uptime through December 23rd, and remain actively employed through December 31st. Disbursement was scheduled for January 5th. By Christmas Eve, every single objective criteria had been fully satisfied. The migration wrapped up on November 21st. The audit was entirely clean. Availability stood at 99.98%, and I was actively working at my desk. The $65,000 carried personal significance. My mother, Martha Vance, had required extensive physical rehabilitation following surgery earlier that spring, which had depleted my personal savings. Additionally, I was preparing to pay the initial university tuition and deposit for my 17-year-old daughter, Chloe Vance. Yet the money was only part of the equation. The award represented formal recognition of years spent responding to midnight alerts and covering vacant positions. Whenever a senior role remained vacant, I carried the extra workload. That was my primary flaw. By preventing understaffing from producing visible failures, I inadvertently allowed corporate executives to believe understaffing carried no operational risk. The breakdown began in September when Derek Thornton was appointed Chief Operating Officer. Derek examined my organization chart and tapped 3 vacant senior reliability positions. If the infrastructure is fully automated, why are these expensive replacement hires necessary? He asked. Because procedural documentation is a navigational map, I replied. It does not drive the vehicle when an unexpected storm hits the highway. Derek smiled politely, treating my explanation as an outdated engineering cliché, and froze recruitment for those positions. The board had brought Derek to Vanguard to expand operating margins by $2.5 million prior to an upcoming credit refinancing review. He executed that objective by cutting operational safety buffers. His strategy prioritized structural cost reduction on financial sheets over system stability and production. Derek restricted technical hiring, outsourced night monitoring to a third-party managed operations center, and reduced my core team from 8 senior specialists to 5. He assigned Nolan Drake, a junior systems engineer, as interim cloud lead. Nolan possessed solid skills with modern deployment tools, but lacked experience with Vanguard's legacy client connectors and automated ordering safeguards. The largest proposed saving was shutting down our warm secondary cloud region. On January 1st, projecting $410,000 in annual cloud savings. Where Derek saw idle server capacity, I recognized our only validated recovery path if the primary cloud environment encountered database sequence lockouts during the annual tenant partition rollover. 37 older enterprise retail accounts utilized customized order sequences logic. At midnight on New Year's Day, the platform was scheduled to generate new annual database partitions, resets order sequence counters, and initiate an automated replay engine. If sequence ranges overlapped while the secondary region was offline, reconciliation controls would pause processing queues to prevent duplicate invoices. Stress testing had confirmed this behavior. My technical recommendation was explicit. Retain both cloud regions, postpone database consolidation until January 15th, and conduct 2 supervised recovery simulations with Nolan Drake. I documented my objections through formal channels. On October 16th, I submitted an infrastructure capacity memo detailing the rollover conflict. On November 2nd, I submitted a cross-training requisition. On December 9th, I logged a failed recovery simulation. On December 18th, I issued a formal red status operational risk report opposing the January 1st consolidation. Derek rejected my recommendation on December 20th. The savings must take effect at the start of the fiscal year, he asserted. Delaying consolidation requires explaining why we pay for redundant capacity, then explain that it represents essential rollback protection. During a high-risk transition, I urged, Derek approved the secondary region shutdown regardless, calling the warm region an expensive insurance policy and labeling my red card rule overly cautious. Nolan Drake was scheduled to participate in 2 recovery rehearsals. Instead, Derek reassigned him to execute vendor consolidation spreadsheets and cost dashboards for the board refinancing package. Nolan apologized, asking if he could simply review recorded walkthroughs. You may study the recordings, I told him, but watching a video is not a substitute for hands-on crisis rehearsal. Ensure the warm secondary region remains online during the rollover. He nodded nervously. Management has already signed off on the regional shutdown schedule. Then ensure my formal written objections remain attached to the official change record, I instructed. I continued performing my duties, answering midnight alerts, correcting monitoring errors, and covering missing roles. One evening, my daughter, Chloe, found me working beside an untouched dinner plate. Does your corporation employ any other experienced adults? She asked quietly. I gave her the standard rationalization I had used for years. It was temporary. The next hire would help. And responsible professionals do not abandon client infrastructure. While I was reassuring Chloe, corporate finance was reviewing my earned retention payment for cancellation. On December 23rd, our platform completed its evaluation window at 99.98% uptime. The next afternoon at 4:12 on Christmas Eve, an email arrived with the subject line, Retention Award Notice. I opened the document expecting disbursement confirmation. Instead, the text stated that my retention award was undergoing review and directed me to an immediate video call. Derek Thornton and Laura Jenkins, Vice President of Human Resources, were waiting on the line. Laura spoke first. The board has exercised its general discretion to suspend January retention payouts under the plan's general policy provision. Suspended until what date? I asked. The current retention award will not be disbursed, she clarified. I turned to Derek. Which contractual delivery condition did my team fail to achieve? This decision does not reflect individual engineering performance, Derek said smoothly. Vanguard is enforcing capital preservation measures ahead of refinancing. The signed agreement lists 4 explicit performance criteria, I stated. Which specific benchmark was not satisfied? Neither executive answered. I recited the facts. Migration completed November 21st. Clean audit, 99.98% uptime, and active employment through December 31st. Laura reiterated the legal discretion clause. Derek offered a vague possibility of an equity review in March if I stayed through the next quarter. Completed work had been reclassified as discretionary, while ongoing obligations were treated as non-negotiable. Please provide the administrative justification and my current compensation file in writing, I said. We can handle paperwork after the holiday, Derek replied. Right now, I need your focus on the January 1st consolidation. Vanguard felt entitled to dissolve its financial obligations on Christmas Eve, yet expected my professional commitment to extend through their holiday rollover. Send the operational expectations in writing as well, I added. Calvin, let us not make this an adversarial matter, Derek cautioned. Regresking written documentation of executive directives is standard operational procedure, I replied. I thanked Laura and disconnected. Derek interpreted my composure as compliance, having no framework to recognize that my silence marked the permanent boundary of my tolerance. I saved my original retention contract, requested my employment file, and logged the meeting details. At home, Chloe asked if management had confirmed the payout. They canceled the agreement, I told her. She looked up in disbelief. After you fulfilled every single requirement? Apparently, fulfilling every requirement is when an executive promise becomes easiest to break, I said, on December 26th. Laura transmitted formal written confirmation that the $65,000 would not be disbursed. I met with Clara Lawson, a senior employment attorney. Clara reviewed the contract and informed me that my complete performance created a compelling claim under contract law and promissory estoppel doctrines. She gave me 3 clear instructions. Retain only personal compensation records you are legally authorized to keep, copy 0 proprietary technical code or client data, and never enter Vanguard's production network after employment terminates. I owed Vanguard honest work through my final contracted day. I owed clients a thorough operational transition. I owed security a complete surrender of every credential. I did not owe anyone ongoing, uncompensated access to my technical judgment after they terminated the agreement paying for it. That evening, I drafted a formal resignation effective at 11:59 in the evening on December 31st. At 9:00 on December 27th, I submitted my resignation to Laura, Derek, and security. Laura called within 12 minutes, arguing that my departure created operational exposure. I raised those exact risks in written memoranda in October, November, and December, I reminded her. I will evaluate an extension if Vanguard honors the original $65,000 contract before year end. Derek joined the call and refused, calling my stance unprofessional. I am completing my existing employment contract as written, I answered. You are requesting to purchase additional professional services after canceling agreed compensation for work already performed. Over the next 5 business days, I worked standard corporate hours and conducted offboarding with absolute diligence. I authored a comprehensive 28-page transition document, recorded 3 technical walkthroughs, provided an access control matrix, cataloged 37 custom connector exceptions, and attached my original October risk assessment. At 5:30 each afternoon, I powered down my workstation. I scheduled 2 recovery rehearsals for Nolan Drake, but Derek pulled him into cost meetings and board presentation assignments. You may study the recordings, I told Nolan, but watching a video is not a substitute for executing a live recovery under pressure. Ensure the warm secondary cloud region remains online during the rollover. On December 29th, Derek suggested I leave my administrative identity active after New Year's Eve as an operational precaution. Security Policy 7.3 mandates that privileged identities must be decommissioned immediately. Upon employment termination, I replied. Submit written authorization from security and legal counsel if you desire an exception. No authorization arrived. On December 31st, I initiated the offboarding ticket myself, copying security and legal counsel. Security verified the physical return of my equipment and confirmed the automated revocation schedule. At 11:59 in the evening on December 31st, I logged out. At 12:01 in the morning on January 1st, corporate security executed the automated script disabling my administrative profile. I received confirmation on my personal emails and saved it alongside my resignation records. I simply ceased to be an authorized user when my employment contract concluded. At 2:07 in the morning on January 1st, Vanguard's approved consolidation automation executed, shutting down the warm secondary cloud region. The annual tenant partition rollover initiated seconds later. The initial database warning reached the third-party managed operations center shortly after 2:15. The outsourced monitoring analyst classified the latency alert as a routine processing delay, clearing it from the primary dashboard. The architectural failure appeared minor at first. Several older enterprise retail connectors reported delayed transaction acknowledgments. Nolan Drake checked the primary cloud region, confirmed that server instances were active, and executed standard service restarts documented in the basic runbook. The warnings cleared briefly, then reappeared with higher volume. What Nolan could not observe on the executive dashboard was that new annual tenant database partitions had opened, while the automated replay engine scanned unresolved holiday transactions. Sequence ranges from 37 legacy client connectors overlapped. With the warm secondary region offline, the reconciliation engine could not verify which partition owned the next valid order number. The system performed exactly as designed under safety guidelines. It automatically locked affected transaction queues to prevent issuing duplicate invoices to enterprise retail clients. Restarting connector services temporarily cleared surface alerts but did not resolve database sequence ownership. Each automated restart introduced additional incomplete replay requests into locked queues. Nolan possessed my 28-page transition runbook, but he had never executed the live crisis rehearsal that would have demonstrated why command order was critical. Throughout New Year's Day, retail transaction volume remained moderate and delayed orders accumulated silently inside database queues. At 5:40 in the morning on January 2nd, morning retail transaction traffic surged across North America. Locked connector queues filled rapidly, inventory synchronization halted, and client warehouse fulfillment systems could no longer confirm customer purchases. By 6:17 in the morning, $28.4 million in enterprise retail orders sat paralyzed inside Vanguard's database queues. That was when Derek Thornton began calling my mobile phone. At home, I could deduce the general nature of the failure, but lacked access to live telemetry and refused to speculate. Derek sent 3 urgent text messages containing telemetry screenshots, followed by a message reading, "Fix this immediately." I replied with a single message. My administrative access concluded under Offboarding Ticket 4892. Contact Corporate Legal Counsel to establish a formal engineering engagement. Inside Vanguard headquarters, the situation escalated into an executive crisis. Nolan requested immediate authorization to restore the warm secondary cloud region, but automated consolidation scripts had released server reservations and standard recovery templates failed to launch. Derek demanded an immediate override of security protocols, ordering security to reactivate my identity. The director of corporate security flatly refused, citing that my employment had ended and no contract authorized my presence inside production. General Counsel Monica Bell confirmed the legal boundary. An emergency operational outage does not nullify data compliance regulations. Derek called my line directly and demanded I use an old token. When I reminded him that credentials had been decommissioned under Policy 7.3, he asked if I had disabled my access to create leverage. I executed the standard offboarding procedure mandated by corporate policy, I replied. Enterprise Security performed account revocation and confirmed the action to your legal department. We need you to work around those security controls, Derek insisted. Bypassing corporate security controls would constitute an unauthorized intrusion under federal data protection statutes, I answered. Submit a formal, lawful request through legal counsel. By 7:30, CEO Eleanor Hayes joined the incident bridge, demanding to know why the secondary cloud region was offline. Derek claimed the architecture team evaluated the risk as manageable. Nolan Drake corrected the record on the recorded bridge line. Calvin Vance formally classified the operational risk as red. His written technical objection is attached directly to the approved change management record. Eleanor requested immediate production of all underlying change documentation. Someone retrieved my October 16th capacity memo. Page 2 accurately described the active outage, overlapping database sequence ranges, locked processing queues, and mandatory secondary region restoration required prior to transaction replay. The revelation completely shifted the executive narrative. This was not an unpredictable technical anomaly. It was a fully predicted architectural failure with an unambiguous paper trail of executive approval. Eleanor inquired whether Nolan had completed required recovery rehearsals. Nolan acknowledged he had completed neither, explaining that Derek had pulled him from the first rehearsal for a cost meeting and assigned him to create board presentation slides during the second. Corporate security confirmed that Derek had personally signed the change ticket, deactivating the warm secondary region. Laura Jenkins disclosed that my earned $65,000 retention payment had been canceled on Christmas Eve. The archive timestamps provided undeniable proof of responsibility. By 8:40 in the morning, the order backlog reached $37.6 million. All 61 enterprise retail clients were experiencing operational disruption. Pinnacle Retail Group, Vanguard's largest enterprise account, issued an ultimatum. Pinnacle's contract generated $1.52 million in annual revenue, representing 24% of Vanguard's business. Pinnacle's chief procurement officer suspended contract renewal negotiations until the outage was resolved and audited. Finance estimated immediate contractual SLA penalties at $1.2 million. Vanguard contacted an external incident response firm, which estimated 18 to 24 hours to rebuild secondary cloud capacity and clear processing queues safely. The board operations chair rejected that timeline, demanding an experienced incident commander who possessed architectural familiarity with legacy client connectors. Every viable path forward led directly back to the senior engineer, whose technical judgment Derek had treated as disposable. At 9:08, General Counsel Monica Bell called my direct line. "Would you be willing to attend an emergency contract negotiation at 9:30? She inquired. "I will attend a contract discussion," I replied. "However, I will not diagnose or access production systems until Vanguard establishes written terms, provides legal indemnification, and issues audited credentials." At 9:30, I joined a video conference with CEO Eleanor Hayes, CO Derek Thornton, VP of HR Laura Jenkins, General Counsel Monica Bell, and the Board Operations Chair. Eleanor initiated the discussion. "Calvin, we require your specialized technical expertise to restore transaction processing." Monica indicates we must establish a formal independent consulting engagement. "You must," I confirmed. Derek leaned toward his camera. "Calvin, our retail partners require immediate resolution. Enterprise retail partners require an authorized, legally indemnified incident commander," I stated. 9 years of service does not grant a former employee legal authority to operate corporate infrastructure without a contract. I presented my written terms for the emergency engagement. First, Vanguard must immediately disburse my earned $65,000 retention award in full as completed contract performance, completely separate from any emergency consulting fee. Second, the emergency consulting engagement required a prepaid $30,000 retainer covering up to 40 hours of incident response at $750 per hour. Vanguard must supply complete written legal indemnification, issue monitored temporary credentials, and formally designate me as sole incident commander for the duration of the crisis. Third, all incident telemetry logs, change records, and executive communications must be preserved without alteration. No corporate statement could assign blame to Nolan Drake or third-party monitoring staff for decisions executed above their operational level. Derek dryly laughed. "You are negotiating terms against an active enterprise outage. I am establishing clear operational authority before accepting responsibility for a compromised system," I replied. "Your external consulting firm quoted emergency rates for an 18-hour recovery window. My terms represent standard professional risk management. Canceling earned compensation on Christmas Eve while expecting uncompensated holiday incident coverage was opportunistic. My terms are explicit and ready for execution." The board operations chair inquired why I insisted on protecting junior staff members. Useful post-mortem audits separate human operational mistakes from structural conditions that render those mistakes inevitable, I explained. Nolan Drake was assigned a complex platform he had not been permitted to rehearse. Scapegoating junior staff satisfies executive optics while preserving management decisions that caused the catastrophe. Eleanor nodded, while Derek stared silently at his desk. Monica Bell confirmed that legal indemnification and monitored administrative profiles met regulatory standards. Laura Jenkins confirmed that the original retention award could be processed immediately via wire transfer. At 11:08 in the morning, Vanguard formally accepted all terms. Wire transfer confirmations for the $65,000 retention award and $30,000 emergency retainer arrived in my account. I signed the independent consulting agreement. Corporate security provisioned a temporary administrative identity, restricted to required recovery services, logged session activity, and granted access. At 11:32, I joined the emergency incident bridge as incident commander. Cease all automated connector restart commands immediately, I instructed Nolan. Freeze current transaction replay state and preserve database queue snapshots. Next, initiate recovery of the warm secondary cloud region using our baseline infrastructure template. Over the next 4 hours, we systematically rebuilt secondary regional capacity and isolated 37 legacy client connector queues from the primary transaction stream. Utilizing the master reconciliation ledger, we identified the exact last confirmed order sequence number owned by each annual database partition. At 3:50 in the afternoon, the initial set of recovered client connectors began processing live transactions. We maintained isolation on the primary backlog until cryptographic checksums verified that no transaction was lost or duplicated. We then released queues in controlled batches, verifying database integrity metrics after each phase. At 7:20 in the evening, the entire $37.6 million order backlog had been completely processed. 0 client transactions were lost, 0 duplicate invoices reached customers, and Vanguard's platform returned to fully operational status with active 2-region redundancy. The following morning, January 3rd, Vanguard's board convened a formal post-mortem hearing. Derek Thornton argued that I had allowed the organization to develop an unacceptable operational dependency on a single engineer. On that basic point, we are in complete agreement, I stated to the board. The fundamental point of disagreement is whether I allowed that dependency or repeatedly documented it while requesting structural remediation. I presented the written evidentiary trail, the October 16th capacity memo, the November 2nd training requisition, the December 9th failed simulation record, and the December 18th red status risk report. Nolan Drake testified that Derek had removed him from recovery rehearsals to build executive financial slides. Monica Bell confirmed that Security Policy 7.3 legally mandated credential termination upon my departure. Corporate security produced audit logs, demonstrating 0 unauthorized access attempts on my part. The board of directors concluded that the platform crisis resulted directly from an approved infrastructure reduction, ignored engineering warnings, and canceled training rehearsals. The audit confirmed 0 sabotage, 0 retaliation, and 0 improper conduct on my part. Derek Thornton was placed on immediate administrative leave pending a corporate governance review and was subsequently terminated. Following the hearing, CEO Eleanor Hayes offered me a permanent executive position as Vice President of Global Infrastructure with a substantial compensation package. I respectfully declined. No monetary figure can repair a corporate culture that treats contractual commitments as optional whenever honoring them becomes inconvenient. I fulfilled the remaining hours of my consulting contract by assisting Nolan Drake in establishing a crisis rehearsal framework and documenting security controls required by Pinnacle Retail Group. Vanguard paid my full retention award and emergency retainer. I placed a significant portion into Chloe's college fund and restored savings spent supporting my mother's recovery. I subsequently accepted an offer as Vice President of Platform Resilience at Apex Infrastructure, with a base compensation 22% higher and an approved budget to recruit 4 senior reliability engineers before our upcoming cloud migration. My operational authority finally aligned with my professional responsibility. I removed Vanguard's alert application from my mobile phone and stopped treating quiet family evenings as borrowed time. On my first morning at Apex Infrastructure, I placed my framed red card on the wall above my workstation. No production change without a designated rollback owner. Apex's CEO noticed the sign during a walkthrough, read it twice, and asked if we should incorporate the rule into our formal policy. Yes, I replied with a quiet smile, before we require a post-mortem to explain why it was necessary. I stopped confusing self-sacrifice with true professional loyalty. The day I firmly enforced my professional boundaries, the organization was finally forced to confront the operational risk I had been carrying on its behalf. Loyalty without boundaries is not devotion, it is simply unpaid risk.